And a big thank you goes to Alonzo Derrick for coming and having that conversation with us. We appreciate his time. And, of course, he had such a great game. So did all of UIndy. We talked about the score in that interview, 28-14. But just how about reiterate that? Let's take a look at some of the highlights here where there were no highlights for UIndy in that first half, right? Because it was just such a poor start for them. Truman State scored the first 2 touchdowns. You go into halftime down 14-0. And it was just a completely different UIndy team coming into the second half.
Tale of two halves. I mean, that's kind of how the story turned out last year against Truman. Truman's a solid squad. They're very good, very well coached. Greg Nesbitt is a great head coach. But, man, UIndy came out firing on all cylinders. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it was just interesting to see kind of the difference between the two halves where, and of course the snow played a big part. You heard Alonzo talk about that quite a bit where they came out, it wasn't really expecting that Saturday snow. It was supposed to wait until Sunday to come. It snowed literally all morning from 6 a.m. to right before kickoff at 2. Left the field completely covered, that poor conditions. And it was just so many times, especially for UIndy in that first half, where they dropped the ball. And take a look here. That was called an incomplete pass because McNeil's caught it. Watch the replay. He catches it, does not have full possession, doesn't make a football move, and it gets knocked out, right? So that's basic. That's how football works. Incomplete pass. Never had possession. A couple plays later, here's what happened. The same thing goes to, at this point, it was Jeremiah Lee. Same thing. Oof. Is that not the exact same play? 2 plays later, and they called it a fumble that Truman State took back, scored 3 plays later.
You know a hit like that hurts in the cold. But these are the games that you live for as a football player. You know, you live for the cold, rainy, sloppy, like muddy games. And this happened to be one of them, and it turned out in UIndy's favor.
It was such a special day. You can't write anything better than that. In the snow, the winner wins the championship. That's exactly what UIndy did. Now GLVC Champions. Their 8th time since the conference started playing football in 2012. 10 years, and they've won 8 of these GLVC championships.
It's big time. It's big time. Unfortunately, we saw Torrey come back and try and get it going. Decided it didn't feel right, so Jaquan stepped back in for Toriano Clinton, and I think he did a great job.
Yeah, he played a great game. It was really impressive. Awesome. We just saw one there of Jeremiah Lee scored a rushing touchdown, Buchanan had a rushing touchdown, but Alonzo Derrick had 2 touchdowns, leads the team on the year in all these categories, but on the game as well. Most receptions, most touchdowns, most yards, and it really was in the second half when they would throw just a little 5-and-ins, little short routes that just get kind of the offense going, get the quarterback comfortable. And that's really what led to such a successful day in that second half. It was kind of just the difference between let's not just run the ball failing twice on first down and second down and then go for a deep shot on 3rd and 9 that fails. They did a really good job mixing up those play calls. The first 2 plays of the drive were typically passes, short passes. A lot of them went to Derrick, and he really made them pay.
Well, and that goes towards, Conkling's kind of a newer quarterback back in the system, hasn't gotten
Keep
much
an eye on
time
this one here.
starting.
Down by 7, trying to drive, and it's Cavante Houston who takes it to the house. Houston, the GLVC Defensive Player of the Week. Derrick's the Offensive Player of the Week in the conference, and that's a big reason why Houston was able to. Took it all the way back. The final score was 28-14 there, but Truman State was trying to tie it up with 3 minutes left. It was a much closer game than what that 14-point spread suggests.
Yeah, I thought it was a great game for UIndy. Obviously, conference championship doesn't get much better than that. Hopefully, you want to move on and carry that on to the playoffs, to the Division II national title playoffs, and we'll see. They go on to take on the undefeated MIAA champions, Pittsburgh State in Kansas. It was today when I found out that Pittsburgh State was in Kansas.
Pretty interesting, huh?
Yeah.
We'll talk about that next week. We'll give you the recap of how that game goes. This game was not the only one that we called and broadcasted over the weekend for UIndy TV. We had 4 others, right? Let's start with the 2 UIndy women's basketball games that we had broadcasted, starting with UIndy's game against Malone.
But she had the
Not
look.
quite the start the UIndy's women's basketball team wanted. They started 0-2 on the year after they lost to Malone and lost to Ashland, which we'll show you in a little bit as well.
Yeah, and this was kind of a demoralizing loss in the sense that they were in the game the entire time.
Last year's GLVC all-freshman team.
Just couldn't keep up
30
with
seconds
the
left to play in the opening period.
The
dish down to number 3, Caroline
Jackitis,
Jackitis, and she puts it up in school.
2 completely different games, though. We see here they scored 19 first quarter points, ended up having the lead going into the quarter break, and it was just such a close game against a good Malone team, right? It was a GMAC GLVC crossover. They played well against Malone, were in the game the entire time, just couldn't finish it out. Ashland, though, was the other way around, where they weren't in the game at all. They scored 2 points in the first quarter, it was just kind of a really tough performance. The full court trap really was the Achilles heel for this team, and it was just kind of a struggle that second game. But I mean, against Malone, they played pretty promising. They were back and forth the entire game.
I mean, the score was tied 6 times. The lead changed 10 times in this game. As you said, it was back and forth. There was a moment, as you can see, where Malone got up by double digits, but UIndy got right back into it. You know, they forced some turnovers, they hit some key shots, big-time shots. Just couldn't finish it, though.
Yeah, it was really good to see them able to hang around in that game on Friday. Ashland wasn't the same, but Ashland obviously the 5th-ranked team in the nation too. So you're not going to have a whole lot of success here. As we see some of the Ashland highlights, started 21-3. Had a nice highlight there, but all for nothing because UIndy ended up losing that one pretty handily.
Yeah, that Ashland team is one of the best women's basketball teams that I've seen in Division II.
Look at that, though. Embarrassing across the timeline. Didn't amount to much, but it was a nice little momentum builder to start.
Nice little step back 3 from Alani Williams-Harris. Yeah. They have the pieces there to maybe go on and win a good number of games, but they just couldn't put together 4 straight quarters of good basketball.
The loss to Malone was by 6 points, 88-82. Good showing on offense, and then they fell to Ashland 87-49. So not quite the same level of play at the end of that game.
Yeah, in turnovers. Turnovers were a big storyline, not in the traditional sense. Turnover numbers were fairly similar, but the points off turnovers, UIndy couldn't capitalize off those Ashland turnovers.
Different story for the men's team, though. UIndy's men's basketball started their season against Ohio Dominican. They played Lake Erie as well, and we see some of the highlights from both games here together. Against Lake Erie, it was a bit of a slow start, and we see here it was 7-2, ended up getting back in the game, and they won both games. Really looked pretty good. Ohio Dominican, they won 81-39. Yes, I said that right, 81-39. And against Lake Erie, it was 78-65. So 2 big wins, double-figure wins for both, and it was just such a dominating performance for the weekend.
I mean, they just rolled over that Ohio Dominican team. That was not the best team that I've ever seen on a Division II floor, that's for sure. But, you know, UIndy kept the Panthers in check the entire game, defensively, forcing turnovers, you know, getting out and running on the fast break. And, you know, that's what won the game for them against Ohio Dominican, for sure.
Yeah, and it was really encouraging to see against both teams, good defense and a really potent offense, scoring 80 points on average over the weekend. So it's pretty impressive for UIndy men's basketball, and I'm excited to see what the rest of the season is going to bring for them. Obviously, these aren't the best teams in the GMAC. They were picked 6th and 10th, respectively, on the weekend between ODU and Lake Erie. But they blew out 2 GMAC opponents, and it could be a pretty good season for UIndy. And, of course, they're picked number 1 in the GLVC by the coaches, so it definitely makes things a bit more of a target on UIndy's back, but I think they're going to be able to pull through. They're a good team this year.
Yeah, they are. Then they've got a deep bench. They've really reloaded talent-wise. You know, went after the transfer portal, got some key recruits in, and kept a lot of the key contributing guys from last year. Of course, Corey Miller Jr.'s gone. He was back in attendance at the game, but you know they look like there's an excitement on campus around the team.
Yeah, you do lose 2 of your top scorers and top leaders in Miller Jr. and D. Montgomery. They both graduated. They're gone. But they have so many good transfers that come in. And obviously, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th best players on the rosters returning, and now they've got another season under their belt. They've got more leadership. They've got another year in the system. But these transfer players played so well. It is really fun to see. Jarvis Walker being one of them.
Yeah, didn't miss a beat. Didn't miss a beat at all. Knew the offense, knew their role in the offense, and knew the role on defense. So that's exactly what you want to see from guys who are coming into a new system and still trying to learn it.
UIndy plays Division I Western Kentucky University on Tuesday on the road. That's just an exhibition game, though. Doesn't count towards the schedule, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're within single digits of that D1 team by the end of the game.
Well, you know, we saw it in exhibition games last year against Butler. They almost knocked Butler
defeated
off.
Butler. Not saying a whole lot because it's Butler basketball from last year, but you're right.
It's a Division I opponent, though, you know?
Yeah, and I'm excited to see how they play against Western Kentucky. They're not back at home until December 1st, though. We'll have that game on UIndy TV, but they do have a bit of a road stretch here, 4 straight road games.
Yeah, 4 straight road games, but they're carrying over the momentum from a dominant homestand. And Jacoby Robinson, man, he was fantastic in both of those games. Of course, against Lake Erie, he came away with a double-double, 20 points, 10 rebounds, 6 for 8 from 3, though. 3-pointers is this team's calling card this year. And it's kind of strange. It's something we haven't seen in the past where you have multiple guys that are capable of hitting 2, 3, 4 5 threes in a game, and it's a big boost to your offense.
Not only just guys that can hit threes, but they're big guys. You've got 2 forwards, and you mentioned Robinson. Sean Craig, a freshman, 3 for 3 that first game from downtown, and he was 3 for 5 or something in that area for the second game. So he had himself a great day shooting from behind the arc too. And these are big guys, so it's hard to defend.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jarvis Walker earlier. I think he's going to be a key piece off the bench for the whole season. You never know, he might crack the starting lineup too.
Yeah. And not to mention Bruno Williams, who transferred in after being second team all GLVC with Lewis last season, led the team in scoring the year before. They've got some good players here.
They do.
Also, a kudos, and we'll kind of solemnly end the season here for UIndy men's soccer and women's volleyball. Kudos to them for a great year, right? They lose in their tournaments over the weekend. Their season ends, but they had a great season, and it was a lot of fun to watch the games we were able to call.
Yeah, men's soccer, of course, losing to Lewis, where Bruno Williams transferred from. They lost 2-1. It was a tough go of things. They got up early, 1-0, and then in that second half of action, they just couldn't get anything rolling, and Lewis really got on them with 2 goals.
So we're going to finish the season with a 10-5-3 record. Kind of started the season slow, really came on strong, thought that they had a real good chance of getting in that GLVC Championship, winning it, but a tough Lewis team that beat him earlier in the year. So congratulations, though, to first-year head coach Gabe Hall. Did a good job coming in and really leading this team to the promised land almost. They played really well down the stretch.
And, with John Higgins departing for Xavier, that's a big shoes to fill. He really did a great job in his role, and Gabe Hall stepped up, and props to coach.
Similarly, with UIndy's volleyball team over the weekend, they lost in the GLVC tournament. They won the first set against Rockhurst, and then the Hawks came back and won the next 3 sets, so they fell 3-1 in the 4th set there. But again, another great season. A lot of great players, some good senior leadership for this team that they're going to see depart, but it was a successful season for the volleyball team here at UIndy.
There's stuff to build on. There's always going to be stuff to build on, but there's positives that they can take out of these performances. They finished just a game under 500, 500 in conference play. I mean, this is a tough conference to win in.
Yeah.
You won 6 games out of 12. That's a positive in my mind. So hopefully the seniors graduating laid the groundwork enough for the younger kids to step up and really have a good season next year.
Again, congratulations to UIndy's football team for winning the GLVC Championship, and they'll play on Saturday. That's all for UIndy Sports. When we come back, Division I football, including Purdue and Notre Dame with wins. That's next here on Last Call.